Just a quick video on the role that monetary authorities play in financing the current account deficit. So we have the current account. As you remember, we are simplifying for these theoretical slides and thinking about exports minus imports, X minus M, and not worrying too much about gifts and income flows, which are also, of course, components of the current account. So what we find, as you know, as we showed last time, is that if we have a current account deficit, this will be offset, at least partially, by a financial account surplus, and the financial account is equal to capital inflows, so money coming into the country either because foreigners are buying US assets, if we're talking about the US, or US investors are repatriating their money, so they're selling foreign assets. So we've got capital inflows minus capital outflows. Capital outflows mean that US residents are buying foreign assets, or alternatively, foreigners who previously held US assets are now selling them. So a country with a deficit on the current account, say like here, like the US, will have presumably some offsetting transactions. So this is being, we could say that the financial account, the private capital flows are at least partially funding the deficit on the current account. And let's imagine an interesting world where there are no monetary authorities. So there aren't any people buying and holding foreign exchange reserves in order to manipulate exchange rates or anything like that. So if we had no monetary authorities, then the official settlements balance, and we're also ignoring the statistical discrepancy because that's more of a measurement problem than a theoretical problem, but the official settlements balance, ignoring, not worrying about the statistical discrepancy, will be equal to the capital account plus the financial account, and this will be zero because there won't be any official settlements because there's no monetary authorities. So what that essentially just means is if you didn't have central banks and other monetary authorities intervening, buying and selling foreign exchange reserves, then if you had a deficit on the current account, it would need to be funded by private capital flows. If private capital was no longer interested in funding your current account, then you would experience exchange rate depreciation, which would increase exports, decrease imports, and reduce the size of your current account. So that would all occur naturally. So that's a no monetary authority world, but we do have monetary authorities. So for example, the US has large current account deficits. And if you look at the table in your book, you can see there's a table about the US's recent experience. And you might be surprised to find that the bulk of the current account deficit in the US is actually funded by monetary authorities acquiring US assets. So let me see. So if we just quickly look at that and you can see what's going on. This was for 2013, and this is in your book. It's figure 16.1 on page 372 of the 16th edition of Pugel. So this is from the 2013. You can see that on the current account, the US had a substantial deficit of minus, it was $379 billion. And that for the private capital flows, they're rather modest, but they were positive, as you might expect. On the financial account, the surplus for the US, this was the year 2013 from the book, the surplus for the US is plus 64 billion. And that the bulk of the financing for this rather large current account deficit actually came from changes in official international reserves, not from the point of view of the US. We weren't really doing anything. It was actually foreign monetary authorities that were accumulating US dollar denominated assets. The asset of choice is the US Treasury bond. Might as well earn a little bit of interest whilst you're at it. And so this was plus 287 billion. So you can see that the accumulation of US assets on the part of foreign monetary authorities was far in excess of the accumulation, the net accumulation of US assets by private investors. And then if you want to add this up, actually the statistical discrepancy was 28 billion. So you can add up. So we've got negative 379, then we have 287 plus 64 plus 28. So that sums to the current account. So the statistical discrepancy is in there, but from a theoretical point of view, what we're really interested in is this idea that the US is running large current account deficits. There's a partial funding of that by private acquisition of net private acquisition of US assets, but the bulk of the activity by 2013 was foreign monetary authorities. Why were they doing it? Why is China accumulating US dollars? Well, it's because they don't want the dollar to fall, because if the dollar becomes cheap, Americans will cut back on buying Chinese goods, possibly Chinese people will buy more American goods, and the Chinese have very strong domestic policy needs to keep the factories of China humming in order to command political legitimacy with the people of China. And so we have essentially what we have is this is really propping something up. We've got these foreign monetary authorities that are trying to keep the party going as far as continuing to have US consumers buy lots of foreign imported manufactured goods. And so that's the role of the monetary authorities. It's pretty big. I don't know if that surprises you, but that would be the one reason why you might wonder if this can keep going, because at some point maybe that becomes politically infeasible or something like that. It's rather different than, say, the 90s, when there was a lot of enthusiasm for investing in the US, and so you have these privately motivated capital flows as opposed to the activities of monetary authorities.